Today, I just want to remind you that a narcissist, a toxic person, an abuser, a cheater, a liar, a person just doing bad in a relationship or treating you poorly has no control or reign over your life unless you continue to give it to them. That is a hard pill to swallow, but we need to have the conversation. This is not in direct response to anything in particular. This is actually normally my advice segment, but instead of focusing on one particular piece of advice, I want to focus on feedback for a group of comments that I typically receive. So recently I shared a video where I discussed the reason that you shouldn't go tit for tat in your relationships. And there was some positive feedback, but there's always some things that I think we need to dig a little deeper into. And I also think that sometimes people disagree and gives us an opportunity to bring things to light and to ask those questions. So if you know me, you know that I like to ask questions when people ask me a question for clarity, especially when it's a live setting, because I like for you to get these answers stirred up inside so you can feel confident with the conclusion that's made as opposed to me just telling you what I observe. So being that this conversation stemmed from stop going tit for tat in your relationship, the underlying assumption anyway, is that you are in a healthy relationship or you are in a relationship that is not necessarily spiraling or toxic in any way. It's just y'all have disagreements from time to time and you find yourself being petty, going tit for tat, keeping score, all the things. However, there were a few comments that said something to the tune of, yeah, but what if he's like this? Yeah, but this doesn't work in this case. And one of them was, imagine you stop going tit for tat to find out that the person is a narcissist. And so my immediate response was, imagine finding out that the person is a narcissist and not realizing that you have a choice, like you can leave that situation. Now, of course, this caused that person to deflect even further and say, oh, you must have never dealt with a narcissist before. Spoken like somebody who's never dealt with a narcissist before. What does that have to do with anything? And how do you know that I've never dealt with a narcissist before? How do you know that I'm not having these conversations? Because I have, because I do have that experience, right? And so, but none of that matters, because the conversation that we're having here is, what can you do? What does us constantly calling out a narcissist, calling out a toxic person, calling out what they're doing to us, what does that do for us in the moment? Unless you are calling out for other people to come and save you from that situation, calling it out and then making the executive decision to stay, what are we doing? So what I like to direct our attention to is not what the other person is doing, because a blind man can see that a person who's being a narcissist, a person who's being toxic, a person who's being nasty, a person who's consistently working to destroy another individual is not a decent person. We don't have to spend time trying to figure out why they are that way. We need to spend our time and energy on, what am I going to do to get out of this situation? And why was I here in the first place? When I do make it out, I need to reflect on how I allowed myself to get to that position so that it doesn't happen again. And unfortunately, this is the conversation that makes so many people uncomfortable, and you don't want to go down that path because there's a lot of accountability, there's a lot of responsibility. But all I'm asking you to do is own your portion. That's all you need to do. You don't need to apologize for the way that this person is. You need to apologize to yourself for allowing that person, when you saw who they were, to continue to be in your space. You can never control them. You can never make them stop. Complaining about what they did to you, what they're currently doing to you, is not effective. As much as it makes you feel like it's a solution, or it makes you feel better that you're complaining, you're not doing anything but continuing to seal the deal when you stay there. You're continuing to let yourself down. You're continuing to give them permission to do more and more and worse and worse. And so at some point, we have to say, okay, yes, this person is doing all of these things to me, but I'm also allowing it. And that is the challenge for some people. Never would I say that you're the reason that they're doing those things to you, but you are partly responsible for them continuing to do those things because you refuse to remove yourself from the situation. And then I also want to add that when we talk about narcissism, a lot of people have taken this term and made it to be one thing, when really narcissism is an umbrella. Narcissism is a person who has inflated self-ego. They have a very high sense of self. And I've said before that that will manifest itself in different ways. Not everybody who's dealing with a narcissist is being physically abused, verbally abused, injured, cheated on. Sometimes they're playing manipulative mind games. Sometimes they're not touching you or harming you at all. They're just creating distance in a relationship because they're so self-centered that they don't know how to serve other people. So when we talk about a narcissist, you also have to understand that just because it triggers you and it plucks your nerves and it opens your wounds from dealing with a particular type of narcissist, that doesn't mean that everybody has experienced that. So we have to address that as well. But the larger part of this issue that I find is we spend so much time trying to control people instead of trying to regulate how much access they have to us. I sometimes sound like a broken record, but I feel like we need to hear it again and again. You as a woman, you as a person in a relationship, I always say as a woman because I'm a woman talking to other women, but you as a woman will not get better. Your situation will not change if you continue to stay there and victimize yourself. At some point, you have to say, yes, this person is doing all of these things to me. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's unwarranted. No, I don't deserve it. But if I continue to stay here and just say those things over and over again, I'm gonna be here 10 years later in the same situation complaining about the same things. And you can't be upset when the people around you no longer want to hear that. It does not make them insensitive. It makes them probably, they're just used to it. They're like, she's never gonna leave. What does she want us to do? So they've grown immune to the problems and the sufferings that you have because part of that suffering is self-induced. What do you want them to do? What do you want us to do? It's not easy, and we're not saying that it has to be a walk in the park. We understand that it's not. But when we have these conversations, just because someone is making you uncomfortable with the truth does not mean that they're attacking you. It doesn't mean that they're trying to put you down. They're trying to say that it's easy, you're stupid. It means that they're bringing awareness to the situation because maybe they think you don't see it. And until you're ready to address the truth, until you're ready to stop trying to control somebody else and instead focus all of your attention on controlling what you're going to do, go to God in prayer if you're struggling. Go to God and ask you for the strength. Ask him to give you spiritual eyes to see what it is that you need to see clearly so that you can get out of that situation. But spiraling in your defense, spiraling and taking offense, spiraling and deflecting, that's not going to help the situation. So I hope that this helps somebody who feels like they're stuck in a relationship. They're trying to make a person change. You're not going to make them change. You're simply not going to make them change. And like I said, if you're single, get up and leave that situation before it becomes a marriage. If you're married, sometimes you actually need to stay in that situation unless you're being abused and seriously harmed. You have to evaluate whether or not you are also contributing to that person acting like that. Are you provoking them to anger? Is it true narcissism or is it in response to you being nasty? This is owning our portion. Not everybody's situation is one size fits all, but I will say the one thing that is one size fits all, you complaining about somebody doing something to you is never going to be effective because you can't control them. We talk a lot more about this, and if you're struggling with this in any way, I would encourage you to join our mentorship where we have our 2 monthly Zoom calls. We also have book club. Book club is only available to people inside the membership, and you also get access to the group chat, which is 24/7, friend. I will leave all of the details for all of those things in the description of this video as well as in a pinned comment. So be sure to check that out. If you have any feedback, if you have any commentary, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below, or you can email me, and my email will also be linked in the description. See you in the next video.